So you go round the factory and there'd be areas that you can see this, but this you can't. It's not. Certain cigars were
that still
from
happens a bit.
Right.
And why not?
Yes, a little bit of mystery, a little.
Yes,
There's
absolutely.
no bad thing.
And if you don't know what you're looking for, how can you look for it? If
Yes.
You know what I mean? This is the problem. I mean, we've had a lot of fun. One of the things that I've spent a lot of time on, and hopefully it's been valuable for the trade generally, is in writing books about and writing the sort of the industry manuals, if
Yes.
you will, for the world, really,
Yes.
because most of them have been translated. I mean, we started in. I've always felt that books are the right way to promote
Yeah,
cigars, because it's a big story.
Yes.
Mark
Yes,
Hugh, the first book we did, which was sort of a bit more. I mean, this is a short appreciation of Havana cigars, featuring H. Upman. I mean, it was short. We didn't really.
And
know
this was, you produced this when?
This was 77. This was
Right.
my first year.
So this was your first, the first bringing the power of advertising and marketing to the cigar industry.
Yeah.
from what you,
yeah.
your experience into cigars.
I'd come out of running accounts which spent millions of pounds on TV in an afternoon,
Yep.
and I certainly didn't have millions of pounds.
No.
I didn't even have enough money to buy sort of decent-sized ads in the Sunday Times colour supplement, which was where you did luxury goods promotion in those days.
Right.
So instead, I felt what we could do is to
Get
tell
the word
story
across.
and run coupon ads in the papers to get them distributed.
Yeah.
I mean, look, not many fat cigars there.
No, that's true.
And
No,
that
that's
was
very
a,
true.
a big
Yeah.
brand. And so all the usual stuff, but so that was where we started. And then at the start of the cigar boom, we produced this, and this was I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I think I have. Yes, I do remember it.
So I mean, it travels a similar path to
Just
the
educating,
previous book, but
and-
more information
and broadening people's appreciation. Yeah.
Yeah, and we had. I mean, the story behind this is quite is bizarre, because we were trying to crack the story of how the tobacco is grown and processed, and nobody at Cuban Tobacco it started off as Cuban Tobacco and then turned into Habanos whilst we were doing this. Nobody in Havana knew much about we just couldn't find out. We'd been visiting for 3 or 4 years and taking notes, copious notes of what we saw, and writing it all down and getting completely confused. I then had a Cuban colleague working at Hunters and Franco, so
Right.
we would sit down together saying, what happens then? He said, well, I've done the Cuban Tobacco training, I think this happens. I said, well, I was in such and such a place,
Yep.
and the bloke said this, which is completely at odds with what you're saying.
Yes.
So we were just didn't know how to crack this until finally he found a manual written for the Cuban tobacco. He found it in Holland somewhere, a manual written in very colloquial Cuban Spanish,
Right.
explaining everything. And so we got that, and that allowed us to put everything
to summarise it
in
into
order.
this.
But after we had to, of course, check that was still the way they were doing it,
Yes.
which you could do. You could pick up a phone sometimes in those days and get
Yeah.
through and just check out
That's
the
it.
format. So, there was quite a challenge. And then we did that without telling our friends in Cuba, and then took it there, and we got the biggest rocket imaginable.
Oh, for
I
giving
was-
away their secrets.
I was developing my career plans on day one, but on day two they said, we love it, do it in 4 languages for the world, with some amendments, but nothing.
So
material.
they gave you a rocket, and then they had to think about it and actually realised that what you were doing was
because we had actually done something which they should have been, an awful lot of what happened in the late 90s, which is when the move took place to have one distributor in each market,
Right.
which was really so that there could be control over the way the products were marketed and presented,
Yep.
and uniformity across all global markets. It took some time to establish, but it was one of the first global networks of cigar distributors anywhere. So it was
Right.
it was really very advanced stuff. It was Francisco Padron was the head of Cuban Tobacco, who fired all the distributors in the world, and then rehired one in each market. That was the principle of what happened between 1988 and 1990.
wow.
And that's when Hunters and Franco blessedly became the one
The one.
in the UK. We still Samuels were still trading, so we had to buy them 3 years later. But,
Right.
So then we did that one, and then they sort of got bigger.
Wow.
You know, because we did this which was the booklet, which is in French.
Yes,
And then
that's been my Bible for a number of years.
So we did that, and that was all done in the UK. That was 6 languages, over $1 million worth of print run, all done here.
Wow. Wow.
And then finally,
the very latest.
The World of the Havana, which is pretty chunky too.
Yes, and which yes.
And I've been involved. It's been a privilege to be in, you know, to be sometimes driving the project.
And all of those.
But always, you know, involved in the writing and the production, because I really believe that's, you know, without that story, I mean, there is a story to tell.
Yes.
Just as there is with the making of cognac or the making of wines. And it's important to get it out there.
Okay, so and I believe you've been doing a lot of research as well in preparation for publishing information on the 225 years of Hunters and Frankow.
I have indeed. I wish I'd written it down, but I've done a lot of research over the last summer at the British Library and various places, and am engaged in producing something which could be a very long article, could be a pamphlet, could be a hardback book.
Yes.
It'll concentrate, I hope, on the personalities and some of the anecdotes that relate to, because I mean there are some intriguing things, I mean, that I knew about but have now got lots more information about. The detail of the incredible enthusiasm for cigars from the 1820s to the for Havana cigars.
Yes.
1820s to the 1840s, and the fact that counterfeit was big news in 1868, for example, when they founded the Havana Brands Association.
Really?
Yeah. And some of the stuff I found is just hilarious. You know. Oh, and incidentally, that was the start of the cigar divans, which, if anything, are the precursor of the outdoor smoking areas, the crosses as we call them, that have sprung up since the smoking ban here, because smoking cigars, smoking generally was pretty much as unpopular when it first happened as it has become now.
Yes.
So we're actually revisiting on a long cycle the conditions
how cigars are smoked in this country.
Right. I mean, London was populated, particularly Covent Garden, Strand, that sort of thing. Was populated with cigar clubs and divans.
Divans. I love that. Divan, a cigar divan. It has,
you know why? It was because the first one was Mr. Glidden's in Covent Garden. Bedford Row, I can't remember which, not Bedford Row, that's not in Covent Garden, but something, Bedford Street maybe. And the reason why it was a divan is because Turkish stuff was the height of fashion in those days, so it was all festooned ceilings and sofas to lie on and
relax.
So on and so forth. And relax and read the papers. And
lovely, and we haven't quite got back to that, but we're certainly it's.
So the book, and it'll be I hope more anecdotal than serious, but things which are still relevant today.
Excellent. I'm sure it'll be fantastic. And I wanted we'll move on to our final 3 questions, but a couple of things I really wanted to end the interview with. One was really just to talk. I think, for those who don't know, that you were a major force at the time of the smoking ban in how the industry fought back against legislation, and I think we can rightly say that the marvel of the sampling, the opportunity to sample a cigar, is down very largely to you and all your hard efforts at that time.
I must admit, I was sort of incensed that the whole idea that here in St James's Street, some of the great cigar shops, that it would be impossible to smoke in their shops. I mean, on their premises was got to me, and it was particularly horrifying when we were completely left out of the original schemes for the bill, where there were going to be places where you could smoke. It was private members clubs and pubs that didn't serve food, which was always fair. I mean, private members clubs stand on their own and could be done, could have been done, wasn't done, was made complicated, unfortunately. But pubs that don't serve food didn't quite get there. I mean, John Reed was behind it, and I think his heart is in the right place, but it didn't really make sense. But there was no mention of specialist tobacconists, so one had to go in whilst the legislation was being developed and try and sell this idea that here we had some craft shops, some specialist cigar shops, where, you know, this is not the sort of service that could ever be replicated in Tesco's or wherever. That people had to have a huge amount of knowledge and experience of the 150 different cigars they might sell, the pipe tobaccos, the loose tobaccos of various types, and that pipe tobaccos in particular, and that you know, it was rather like, you know, not being allowed to sample cheese in a cheese shop. I'm sure there could be arguments for it, or and you know, so we started building this idea. One, that it's de minimis, it's tiny. There are only 50 odd shops of this type, which qualify under the current legislation. There is a definition of, I won't bore you with the details of what is a specialist cigar shop, and that's pretty rigorous. You know, there's not a lot of them around, but those that are around, you know, are unique and service orientated and have a job to do, which without sampling is. And anyway, we got it on there, and we got support from a government minister, God bless her, and generally, I mean, don't get me wrong, this never went to a vote. The whole objective was never to allow it to go to a vote of the whole House, because then you get into, you know, all sorts of people who have very little knowledge. And, you know, one almost got tired of listening to people standing up on the other side saying, you know, what is a specialist tobacconist? I've never been to one. You know, well, fine, but, you know, yes, they exist. They employ people. They are a business. You can kill them if you want to, but please don't. And it's not a public health hazard, you know, in any scale at all. Smoking cigars is not good for you. If you don't inhale, it's a lot less damaging than if you do inhale. It's different from some other tobacco products. So anyway, this gained traction, and somehow, whilst all of the other exceptions got shot down in flames, right up until the last night, which was February the 14th, 2006, if you really want to know, in the House of Commons, it stayed there. And we ended up with the sampling exemption in specialist tobacco.
Well, all of those people who are still allowed to sample a cigar in the fine cigar stores of England owe you a vote of thanks for that, Simon. I know they do. Let's just talk briefly and project forward. A question I know a lot of people ask or think about is, what is going to happen when the embargo ends? Because at some stage it must come to an end. What will happen to the cigar industry? What I know it's very difficult, the Cuban cigar industry. What's your feeling? What's going to happen?
It is largely speculative, because what do you mean by the embargo ending? There'll be lots of different ways it could happen. Everything from slight movements in sanctions to a large country invading a small country. But that's not very popular these days, so that's unlikely to happen. But it isn't likely to be clean. It'll be gradual or whatever.
Right.
But basically, what we're talking about is what would happen if the U.S. market was opened up directly to Cuban cigars.
Cuban cigars,
Regardless of what the U.S. government might think, there will be huge problems in the way of that, because as many people will know, some may not, that most of the vast majority of the brands made in Cuba are also made in other places, Dominican Republic, Honduras, Nicaragua, and sold in the United States. So there is a whole ownership on the brand name with which you are familiar. Owned by both sides, and of course the Cuban brands with those names will not be welcome as far as the industry is concerned. So it won't be. I mean, there'll be lawsuits between businesses which will curtail the flow of
issues.
Brand owners. But on the other hand, you also have the consumers, and not all Americans smoke illicit Cuban cigars. A lot of them follow the instructions of the Treasury Department and don't smoke Cuban cigars because it's not what their government wants them to do. And they've been smoking cigars of increasing quality post-cigar boom. I mean, I would say that I wasn't madly impressed by the quality of Cuban cigars in 1991, 92. Since then, non-Cuban cigars, of the cigars out of Jamaica, Dominican Republic, were the big ones in those days. But since then, there's been a huge amount of development of quality and style and interest in the cigars that are on the American market, and that's what the American cigar smokers are used to.
Yes,
and,
yes.
You know, they might try a Cuban and say, I don't like that much.
Yes.
You know, I mean, it's like, you know, it's champagne. You know, if you prefer, you know, something from California, which is perfectly good, or from Australia or whatever.
Yep.
You know,
That's what
that's what you
your
like.
palates
That's what you're used to.
Yeah.
Why go to champagne and pay the extra buck?
Yes.
So there's all of those. I mean, having said that, you know, the biggest premium cigar market in the world would open up to Cuba, and therefore there would be more cigars. There would be an increase in demand for Cuban cigars. I mean, I don't reckon that's going to be more than 30, 40 million max. I mean, it was a long time ago when I came to the conclusion it was 40 million. But say 20 million cigars, and that it's achievable for the Cuban industry with a bit of investment to increase its production by that sort of quantity. Always assuming that the harvests bless them with sufficient tobacco to do it.
Yeah.
The popular idea. I mean, that's what I was underlying and the sort of long trend. So I don't think that there's cause for alarm that there really will be the upset that some people think. It's often said, you know, there won't be any Cuban cigars because the Yanks will get the lot.
Yeah.
Well, Cubans have always been very loyal to the people who've looked after their interests, you know, over the years when America was taking an opposite view.
Yes.
I have no reason to believe that they would change that position. In point of fact, I mean, you might find, because of the difficulty in the US market, that there will be, you know, a lot more cigars being bought in UK, for example, or around Europe by Americans who
then will be able
rather
to
not
legally take them home with them.
Yes, I mean, although that of course is another thing. How many will they be allowed to take home?
Yes.
How friendly will it be? So I think, and that's not to say that there won't be some sort of scare reaction. In other words, if the press announced the end of the embargo, if it was real or not, who knows?
Yeah.
Then you know, people are likely to panic a bit and stock up. So there will be some unevenness
in demand.
In demand. But
Well,
I don't think it's not of a scale that is going to upset the ship, if you know what I mean.
Well, as the UK market has been extremely loyal to Cuba for many, many years, I trust we'll continue to get plenty of cigars as we always have. Let's finish up the interview now, Simon, with just the three standard questions we use to finish our interviews. So, first of all, what do you when you sit down with a cigar? What do you like to drink with a cigar when given the choice?
Okay, well, I'm very much to go towards sweetness. I find so. You know, as far as I mean, if you're looking at spirits, you know, a cognac or an Armagnac, I would prefer to whiskey per se. Although very often these days, with the massive range of taste you have in whiskies, that if it's been in a sherry cask for, you know, for almost as long as I've been around, then it's quite sweet. So that would be characteristic. I like some white wines. I mean, for example, a Riesling. I shared a bottle of Riesling with an Italian friend, when we were smoking a Bolivar Gold Medal. Absolutely terrific, with a slight sort of rustic, you know, tobacco-y, salty flavour of Bolivar. I was refreshed by the Riesling, but Champagne also is, you know, particularly the vintage, the more exotic, I'm afraid. But why is life always like this? Is a very good accompaniment with cigars. I don't like red wine particularly. I don't drink beer with cigars. But there are people in Belgium who do, and of course Belgian beers also produce the sort of array of flavours that I was referring to.
That's true. Yes, sweeter beers. That's true. And what's your favourite place to smoke a cigar, given the choice?
Well, I suppose, I mean, I thought about that. I mean, during the festival, the veranda at the Hotel Nacional, with all of that camaraderie,
hard to beat,
is tough to beat. I mean, I'm not going to be the only person in the world to say that, but that's why it's quite a nice place. In reality, of course, most of my smoking takes place in my shack in the garden, or as we term it, the global HQ of Simon Chase Limited, which is a perfectly nice place to enjoy a cigar. But there's not a lot of room for company.
No, excellent. And finally, What's the if you think back, what's the finest cigar that you ever smoked?
Just the one. Well, it was, I think, it was a Dunhill, it was an H. Upmann Dunhill Selection Suprema number 87, which was part of a stash that I bought from a chap whose brother had a keep, whose late brother had a keep at Dunhill's. This was around 92, 93. The cigars were from the late, or mid to late 60s, and so they were 25 years old by the time I got to light them up. It was a part cabinet for 50. I think I had about 30 cigars in there. And it was a 5-inch 50 ring gauge cigar, so quite chunky.
Yes.
Called a Mundiales in the standard range, but Dunhill Selection Suprema, what did I say, 87 I think it was.
Wow. Wow.
And it was just, I mean, Upmann is extraordinary because it's not generally considered to be something that should age well, but they do. And it just had blossomed. It had reached, you know, one of those great stages that do occasionally happen with old cigars. And in point of fact, I think it would have gone on for another good decade had I managed to keep them. I actually took them to a cigar dinner that I was doing at Mosselman's, where we were smoking 10, 20, 50-year-old cigars.
Right.
Oh no, 25-year-old cigars. I said they were 50. I thought, because, you know, the boom, people didn't really care in those days. And of course they all went, well, all bar, I think, 2.
Yeah,
so,
yes. So,
you know,
well...
It still just was glorious.
Wonderful, wonderful. Simon, thank you so much. It's been absolutely wonderful. As ever, I've learnt a huge amount in talking to you, and I probably got a list of another 20 or 30 questions arising from our discussions, which we could go on with. But for now, thank you very much indeed. That's been great.